Hi, I'm Tim and welcome to episode 15 of Beginning Fabrication. Hello. I actually had two people message me this week asking if I would build a set of shelves out of RHS, this stuff, just to show some intersections or joins, I guess. I don't really need a set of shelves or have room for a set of shelves that I don't need at the moment, and I don't feel like spending all that time making it. So what I thought I'd do is just show a few, let me adjust this, a few handy little intersections. So I guess the basic shelf layout would be, try and draw this upside down. I don't know if you can see this, and I'm just proving how crap I am at drawing. I suppose there probably want to be another leg there. Alright, so there's two shelves. Try and make them straighter than that. So that's the floor. So basically, I've seen people, if that's the leg, then they'll just weld straight off the side. Which I probably should move you around so that it's easy to see. You can do that. The only issue is all of the weight, whatever you're putting on those shelves, is relying solely on the weld. There's no mechanical help, if that makes sense. So how I normally do it, even most of my shelves are just timber, but I make the actual shelf frame as its own piece. So that rectangle, and then I actually countersink it into the leg. So whether you're using 25 by 25 or 25 by 50, I've done a little demo of either. So imagine this is your frame, however that's joined together. Well, it actually goes inside of the leg. So even though it gets fully welded, it's actually sitting on the metal. So even if your weld does fail, which is highly unlikely for shelves unless you're moving them around a lot, it's actually got some proper gravity helping it, not just a weld. Another way to do that without having to rebate your leg is, again, make your shelf frame its own piece, but then have these legs. Where's my pencil? So that would be one piece, and then from there to there would be another piece. So that if this was your shelf frame, it sits on top of the leg and then gets welded, and then for the next shelf the leg continues on. That way it's still using gravity to help support all the crap that's on the shelf. So the only other real thing is the shelf frames themselves. They don't need to be pretty. Well, they don't in my shop anyway. You literally can just butt weld them like that. It doesn't matter if you can see inside it because it's only a shelf. If you want to, you can do a mitre, 45-degree mitre, and weld them that way. And again, when I weld things like this together, I always have a square handy, just so I can, as I'm tack welding it, I can make sure it stays straight and then weld it all up once it's a full rectangle. Another little thing too, if for whatever reason you've got to make a shape that isn't a right angle, then that to some weird degree, whatever that happens to be, probably like, I don't know, 50 to 60 degrees or something. So you can see there's a fair gap. This only has a 45 degree mark on it. So the easiest way I find to get a funny shape like that, you can just use a ruler. In this case you could use that because the gap isn't very big. If it was spread wide open, you'd need to use something that was at least as wide as the gap, which that isn't because it sort of fits inside there. So, and also they don't even need to be mitered, to be honest. You can just use straight ends for this. Sit that on there, and then just get anything that's bigger than the gap, set it over the top, and then just mark both sides. And so, I don't know if you can see that, pencil lines. Once those pencil lines are cut and these two are stuck together, it'll sit inside of that. I might actually just cut it and make sure that I'm right. Alright, so I've cut my pieces. I don't know if you can see, I just went off the side of the line a little bit. Won't focus. I don't know if you can see that, but they're cut. There's our funny shape. And that, I'll just lift you up, fits together pretty well. So that's just another little cheap way of determining what angle to cut your ends to get a funny angle. I can't state highly enough how often I use this thing. And if you're doing any kind of fabrication where you need angles or shapes, I recommend you get one. It's just called a sliding bevel. I've mentioned them a couple of times. And that weird noise is finally rain, if you can believe it. So I think that's enough sort of the coverage for doing RHS joins just for shelves, things that don't really need to look pretty. If there's any other stuff you want to know regarding this stuff, let me know. Cool. It's amazing. It's actually raining. I was just thinking about earlier when I was showing you about rebating RHS to make shelves. These are the cheapy timber shelves that I've got a couple of sort of shelves like this about the place. It's just made out of 35 by 70 framing pine and I don't know, 19mm MDF. The cheapest stuff I could get. There's certainly nothing special about them, but by rebating all of the shelves into the leg, all the weight's actually on the leg. So these screws, all they're doing is holding that against it. They're not actually holding any weight whatsoever. And that's the same principle that I was going for with the steel, just so the weld isn't doing all the work. This isn't really a tip as such, just a thing. A lot of people, when you think of a socket set, you think of 1/2 inch drive, because usually bigger, can be better. This is a little set that I bought a few years ago. It's 3/8 and 1/4 inch, and when it comes to just normal panel stuff, not heavy duty suspension-y kind of work, I probably use this set more than I use my 1/2 inch drive. It's just so handy having, it's got a fair range of sizes. It goes up to 3/4, 19mm, right down to 3/8 and 10mm in the 3/8 drive, and then 3/16 and 4mm in the 1/4 inch drive, plus your spark plug sockets and unis and that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I find this really handy just because it's so small and it fits in tighter areas, and it's still got a good sized handle, so you can put plenty of leverage on it if you need it. So yeah, just don't think that you have to have a big bulky 1/2 inch drive socket set only. Like I like this little tinky set. It's pretty strong and it goes well, and it's nice and light to lug around as well, which is good when you're lazy and old and fat like me. While we're still on sockets and ratchets and whatnot, I just thought I'd go over a few of the bits and bobs that I use quite often that didn't come in a set. These uni joints, these are king chrome ones. I've got a set of 3, so there's 1/4 inch, 3/8 and 1/2 inch. But they're firm, so if you're doing a bell housing bolt from underneath or something where you need to have a fair stretch, you can set the angle that you need the socket and the bolt, whatever to be at, and it's not just going to flop about like a generic universal will. And it's also got a socket lock on it. Another thing, I've got a fair few extensions that have these wobble heads. I don't know if you can see, that's just got a full straight sided end on it. This one doesn't. So when you click it all the way on, it's just a solid fitting. If you let it pop out that far, it gives you that much movement, which quite often can be the difference between it working and it not working. My next favourite universal style thing are these things. I've got 2. I've got a 45 and a 90, and they've got these rods inside, so as they turn it pivots around those rods, which lets it spin through, and it just holds that angle. It doesn't flex at all. And same with the 90-degree one. So both sides spin the same, but the actual bend can't move. And then these ratchet heads, these are really good if you don't need too much force or you don't have much room, and they're nice and fast. These little shorty things, I think this came from Bunnings, 1/4 inch, 3/8 and 1/2 inch all in one. And being nice and short, but still it's got a pretty strong ratchet in it, so you can put a fair bit of weight on it, but it doesn't take up much space. Same with these little fellas with the flexible head thing, so you can shape it to whatever suits your needs. Then my favourite, and probably my most expensive hand tool, but definitely worth the money for me, is this rotator ratchet from Chrome. There's a part number there somewhere. Just trying to get it to focus. I don't know if you can see that. 13914. So I've got a 3/8 and a 1/4 inch one of these. So it still works like a normal ratchet. But it also does this. So when you spin the handle, it spins the head. But also you can go backwards and forwards with the handle, and this will just keep spinning the same direction. And then when you flip it to go the other direction, same thing. So for tight confined spaces, this thing's an absolute gem. So that's about it for my little rundown on sockety goodness. So see you later. I had another request asking about grinding down welds in panel steel. So, like, because it is easy to grind too far and make the metal too thin. So I haven't really got anything on at the moment that's that, so I'm just going to grab, well, I've just got this old bit of HQ dashboard that I replaced a little while ago. I'll just cut a piece out of it and weld it in, and I'll show you how I grind it back. Obviously the first thing I'll do is get rid of the paint where I'm going to cut and weld, so see you in a sec. Alright, so clean that up and I cut a piece out for our little grinding example. The reason I chose this dash piece is because it's got this fairly sizable step in it, so I figured rather than just grinding a flat piece, I'd show you something that's got some contours. I'm not really planning on doing a lot of welding tips in these series. I know there'll be some, but there's so many good videos on YouTube of proper welders with, you know, videos that actually have good production. So I just didn't want to try and compete with people that actually put some effort in, if that makes sense. One thing I will say though, which when I first started welding back when dinosaurs were around, I didn't take into account just how important earth was for welding. I mean, I'd earth it, but just make sure you do have really clean metal. I use a magnetic earth, it's from Milwaukee. A clamp-on earth is fine. I just find this is handy because a lot of the times if you're welding on a big panel, you don't really have anywhere to clamp onto. So that's my earth on freshly clean steel. So I'll get this welded in, and I'm going to use the MIG so it's nice and lumpy, because if I TIG'd it in, there's not really that much to clean up. So I'll MIG it in, and because I'm going to use the MIG, I'm going to take my time and just do basically 100 tacks, because on sheet metal, if you try and do a proper run using the 0.9mm wire that I use, this thing will just be destroyed. Not that it matters because it's only scrap, but even for the example, I still want the finished product to look semi-decent. So I'll get this welded on, and well, I guess it's worth saying for this example and for any panel repair, spend your time getting the piece to fit well, and do what you can to line it up as best you can, because it's only 1mm thick. So even if it's 1/2 mil out and you try and grind it flat afterwards, well then you've ground your material down to 1/2 mil thick. And the thing is, even if you do weld it on 1/2 mil out, in the real world, pretty much everything that gets welded that's bodywork gets a skim of filler over it. So if you're worried about putting 1/2 millimeter worth of filler on your car, well then you probably shouldn't be watching my videos. Alright, so I'll get this welded on and I'll be back. Just another quick thing that I noticed that I do, and I don't know if I've mentioned it, is when welding two pieces that are trying to be at the same level, I use, where are we there, just a screwdriver that's about 6 or 7mm wide, and you can hold it against the two pieces and give them a bit of a push and it'll level them out, it'll put them at the same plane. Or if one piece is too low, like that corner's a little bit low, it lets me know that I just want to flip it over and give it a little tap to make sure that it's at the right level that it needs to be. Now my screwdriver sits flat, and so if you're doing a piece that doesn't quite sit in snug, like obviously I've cheated with this because I've cut a piece out and then I'm just welding it back in again. But if your piece has a little bit of a pull on it and doesn't quite sit perfect, well you can manipulate it with the screwdriver, and as long as it's wide enough, you'll know that you're holding those two pieces at the same height. And again, when you're working with 1mm of material, you need it to be as close as the right height as you can get. And also another reason why I've always got this part of the hammer clipped in, well in this case this hammer broke, so I've welded that part in, is for getting into bits like this where this step is. If it gets a little bit out of line, you can get in there and it's got the flat edge, so it'll hit the two pieces at the same level, but it also gets into those nooks and crannies that end of the hammer won't get into. Not easily anyway, you can do it, but you're more than likely just going to dent the piece. So that's another reason why I like these hammers. Alright, I'll keep welding, so bye-bye. Alright, I don't know if you'll be able to hear me at all because it's raining again, but there's my ugly repair. So I turned the amps down on my welder, but I didn't turn the wire speed down, so it's made it nice and lumpy, which is not what you'd normally do, but purely for the sake of this example, I figured showing how bad it can look compared to how it's going to look couldn't hurt. So I'll get ready to grind this up in a sec. I just also wanted to show you, obviously I've got the grinder, grinding disc. Before 1mm cutting discs came out, these 3mm thick horrible bastards, pardon my, well it's English, used to be what we use for cutting. I don't know if you can see that, it's crazy thick compared to a 1mm disc. Where are we? But what I use these for is grinding. So obviously these things are, well I guess you'd call it blunt. And if you're trying to grind into something fine, this will make a mess. These things, however, are really good for getting into corners. So this isn't so bad. I'd probably be okay just using this on this job. But I just wanted to mention these 3mm cutting discs are really good for doing finicky grinding. And then I'll just finish off with the usual sanding disc. And also, because there's so many spot welds, I always just go in behind with a light and it'll let me know where any pinholes are. So I've done that. I had about 2 or 3 pinholes on this side. So I don't know whether to film the grinding or not because it's going to be boring as, but I'll show you how I'm going to start it. If you grind on the end and on the side a lot, it is controllable, but it's also easy to scoop out the area if you don't really keep an eye on what you're grinding. Because we're sort of surrounded, we've got the lump on this side and then we've got this dash clip thing on the other side. So I'll probably do quite a lot of that on this edge, but I'm going to be really careful with how I go. Whereas these flat sections, you can use the grinder nice and flat. So I'll do a section. I'll go through this. Well, I'll probably just do the whole thing. I'll do a section and then I'll stop. I'll film one little section, even though I'll probably speed it up or something, and just show you how far down I go with the grinding disc before I move over to either one of these or the little roll-locks in a die grinder. So I might stop you now and then I'll start it again to do the grinding. put basically no pressure on the grinder to do that. I just let the weight of the grinder do the work. I'm not sure how well you can see it. There's clearly still material there that is weld. I haven't ground it flat because that's what I use the sanding disc for. And I think for something like this, I'd use a roll lock on a die grinder just because it's a smaller disc. So I might get that ready and then I'll just do this one section. I'll just sand this bottom part and come up these sides, and then I'll come back. Alright, so I've just given that a little bit of a grind, not all of it, I didn't do that bit because I'm lazy and it's Sunday and I want to go home. But I don't know if you can really tell, it's a bit glary, but there's still noticeable weld left on that. It's by no means smooth, especially like through here, and along there you can see that line. Now if you've found that there's certain areas that are just out of alignment, you can hammer and dolly them at this stage. It's even better if you can get into the back and clean the back up, to hammer and dolly it flat. This has come up pretty well because it's the piece that I cut out, so it just fitted perfectly already. Excuse me. So yeah, I'm just trying to see if you can see that there is, I mean it feels okay, but there's definitely still weld protruding the surface. So, and underneath there's been no, if you grind really heavily you can sort of see it through from underneath where you've gone too heavy with the grinder. There's none of that. So I'm going to go and get the what do you call that thing, die grinder with a roll lock on it, and give this another bit of a clean up and show you how it looks after that. Alright, while this is charging up with air, I'll get started because a lot of it I'm going to do at a slow speed anyway. Not perfect by any means, but it's hopefully given you some idea of what I'm trying to do. Right, so that's all I'm really going to bother doing with this, but the main thing was how do you grind without grinding too far. So that's why I wanted to do a really disgusting weld with low amps to show that as long as you just take your time, that's really the main key. There's no particular trick other than wherever the weld is. You know, if this was the top of your weld and you start seeing that the grinder's taking material off beside it, just readjust yourself so that you're in a nice comfortable position to aim the grinder right where it needs to be. Because being comfortable, same with welding, getting yourself comfortable with whatever position you are, or as comfortable as you can be, is important, and it does make a big difference to the outcome. Because if you're in such a horrible position that you can't wait to get out of there, well, you're going to rush it, and obviously that's not the way to do things. I mean, I've rushed this, obviously. You can see I didn't bother going in there, but it wasn't really a case of showing how to repair something and sand it smooth. It was just a case of don't grind into the parent metal too much, regardless of how crappy the weld is. Just take your time and constantly move. I think I said in the first episode about glazing your discs. Just keep it silver, don't let it turn blue, just move about. And if you've got your elbow leaning against something so you can support yourself and hold the grinder on a supported arm, you'll find it a lot easier to float the grinder across even a lumpy weld, and you'll soon knock the tops of the lumpy bits off. And once it's more uniform, it's a lot easier to get this kind of flat finished product. So I hope that was semi-useful. And if there's anything else you want me to try and cover, please just ask, and I'll do my best to show what I do in those situations. Alright, thanks guys. I just watched back the footage of me sanding that HQ dashboard with the roll lock, and it looks like I spent ages sanding it, which you'd think would thin the metal out a lot. The thing is though, is I just don't press on it. I'm the same with the grinder. I put very little pressure on it. So when there's not a lot of pressure on these things, they don't really do a lot. You know, that's barely scratched. This is only single pack etch primer, and that's a brand new roll lock. So you can spend a bit of time on an area with these things as long as you're not pressing hard. Also, if you do press too hard, it just tears the edges to shreds. So don't think that because I'm spending minutes on one little repair that I'm sanding a lot off. It's just a case of I like to move about the area. I'll leave them on here, for example, just where I've welded up a seam. Just keep it even, move about, and holding it as flat as you can. Sometimes you can't, depending on your room. You have to kick it up onto the edge just so it will fit. But yeah, for me, if this was a freshly ground area and then it just needed to be sanded up with this, it'd probably take me at least a full minute just to do that area, because of how little pressure I put on these discs. And it's the same with the grinding discs too. I'm pretty easy on them just because I don't want to kill my grinder or glaze the disc. So that's my reasoning for that. Alright, I'm going to shock you guys. New gloves. Woo, they're all from $8.50. What I wanted to show, even though I didn't film doing the job, but when I was rearranging this F100 guard, I marked it out and cut it neatly, but then I knew that it was going to be going back together in a different position. So this part here, like all the top was excellent, but I wasn't all that happy with how it was at the front, so I let it overlap, got some tacks on the front, and then I came down here somewhere, it might have been there, and put a tack where it overlapped, and then ran the 1mm disc along the edge to cut the excess off. So you can see I've got that 1mm gap, which is perfect for welding up this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just another thing, if you're doing a patch panel and it doesn't fit perfectly, just don't be scared to run the grinder along the edge of it to cut off any overlaps. And I did the same at the back with that new piece that I made. Just saves a lot of time, and it makes sure that you get a really nice fit. well, that's it for episode 15. I hope it was somewhat educational, and again, if there's anything else you'd want to see, either just comment or message me through social media, and I'll see what I can do. Alright, thanks, cheers, bye.